The National Prosecuting Authority, or the NPA, is yet to decide on what action it'll take following the recent judgment in the Coligny sunflower murder. Last week, the Supreme Court of Appeal acquitted farmers Pieter Doorewaard and Phillip Schutte of the murder of 16-year-old Matlhomola Moshoeu. They had been found guilty of murder by throwing him off a moving bakkie. Matlhomola had been kidnapped after allegedly stealing sunflower heads at their farm. The release of the men has left many shocked, especially the teen's family. Gugu Nonjinge is a senior advocacy officer at the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, that's the CSVR, and joins us to discuss this issue. Gugu, thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Leanne.
I mean, for many people, this just did not make sense, despite the reasons given by the judges from the Supreme Court of Appeal that, basically the standard of proof for a criminal trial was not actually met. On what basis, then, were they found guilty in the initial court, and how do the two outcomes differ so much?
I think one thing that we sort of need to take from the situation itself, Leanne, is that these injustices have sort of once again highlighted the very deeply entrenched and systematic issues of racism, as well as violent masculinity within South Africa as a result of patriarchy and, of course, normalization of violence in South Africa. So the court's judgment and the release of the two farmers has sort of gotten us, all of us, a bit of on shock, because we know the incidences, or rather what had happened in Coligny and the brutal murder of Karabo. So it sort of does highlight the systematic issue of racism within our country. Again, last year we saw widespread protests that broke out as community members in that area took to the street, right, to pursue of justice when the two farmers were released in bail. So these versions of events is sort of showing how South Africans are sort of from time and again being disappointed and even led by the justice system.
Now, what we know, and when you read the papers, the state based its case almost exclusively on the evidence of literally one eyewitness, whose evidence apparently turned out to be unreliable and contradictory. What role did this actually play in the case?
It played quite a very significant role, but I also very much would think that us as civil society organizations ourselves, such as the CSVR, together with other ones who are within the social justice sector, sort of look into this, because it's never mind the fact that this case was a case that was sort of very much within the media, but also there are very majority of others who are not discussed and not even looked at depth. So these are some of the things that we need to start paying much close attention to, because violence of this nature in any community seems to be an everyday injustice. As more community members, not just in Coligny, have opened up about previous murders of their black children, right? Another thing that we need to pay specific attention to is that Coligny's pre-existing conditions and the environment speak to a number of apartheid system separationist town, right, of which is something that we haven't spoken about or even looked at. So it also needs to sort of stem from there as well.
Yeah, this is a very emotional case, and I mean the whole situation surrounding it is a very, very tough one to comprehend. I mean, to think to lose your life for 60 rand, being thrown off the back of a bakkie, but on the other side, where we try and take emotion out of the law, because it is difficult, and we understand that. But when we look at the actual side of the law, because when you read the court documents and we see that there was one witness who actually then, as you have mentioned, wasn't turning out to be somebody that could be a reliable source, the police bungling the investigation, not even looking at the bakkie or going several days later to do some of the evidence testing, and the scene was tampered with. All of these things obviously compound the fact that the case was messed up. So as much as we look at the emotional side of things, from having a look at the case itself, in your professional opinion, what do you think of the actual judgment, this latter judgment that has now basically let both of them off the hook?
Leanne, as you're saying, it is a very emotional case, and both me and you can agree that his murder has highlighted a number of issues within the community in the Coligny, issues that are largely interlinked to many other socio-economical and historical concerns in the country and the world of large, right? My personal judgment is of the fact that it was an injustice on him, and the judgment should be still looked at going forward, because it sort of does highlight a number of other concerning things that the country should be paying much attention to, right? Because as I mentioned, some of these incidents happen not in the spotlight. So it is up to us now to call on to local and provincial government as well as other community leaders to address this issue, because in an urgency as well, in such a way that our actions are bold and speak to that of justice as South Africa as a whole. Again, I also think we should be urging the members of Coligny who are involved in the reconciliation processes as well to first surface the root causes of the present conflict of injustice, and again, be in much as involved, because there's a lot that's going to be at play after this judgment. Yeah.
When you also look at the underlying causes of actually what's happening in some of these communities. And this is I think, what we need to really examine, because when this case initially opened and happened, there wasn't even a docket available. I mean, it wasn't even something that was an issue until, of course, the community started protesting, and it received a lot of media and public attention. And then this came to light, and then things obviously started to happen in this case, but the evidence was just not there. What does this speak to in terms of what is going on in communities, and that this is maybe just the tip of the iceberg of things that could be happening, and yet no justice is ever served because not enough noise is being made?
It also speaks to quite a number to how violence isn't deeply entrenched within the South African society. And we are within the 16 days of activism currently. And if we are going to speak about violence, we need to not necessarily speak about gender-based violence alone in isolation, but also be able to untap the normalization of violence in South Africa. We know there's a number of cases that have made the media of people being killed and being burnt by their significant partners. So this issue should be paid with so much attention, as similarly to how we look at issues of gender-based violence, right? Because it also does show how we as South Africans have sort of normalized violence, as well as the violent nature of patriarchy and toxic masculinities within our societies, right? So both these type of violences and type of incidences are symptomatic of systematic failures in addressing these deeply entrenched issues. So it is a matter of us as South Africans starting from a point of understanding what violence is, and also in as much as we have this conversation at a very high level, community members are still very much unaware. And hence the speaking up is the majority of them are a bit silenced by members of let's say police and other authority members within their communities, because they're still not even understanding the very bare minimum concepts of violence and what it means, never mind if it's gender-based violence or any of some sort. So there's still quite a lot of education and awareness that us NGO organizations still need to drive within community members and understanding what violence is.
Yeah. And, the reality is reconciliation is still a very big issue. And I mean, when you speak to some people that talk about what it's like in the community of Coligny, some say that there's just a complete racial hierarchy, and these crimes are hidden, and it is a big problem. I mean, again, when we go back to the court and we look at the documents, the fact that the two men who left this young boy's body on the side of the road didn't even try and assist or help or take to hospital, there's got to be something else at play. My final question to you is, where do the family go from here? First, they have justice. They think that things have gone in their favor. And now everything is undone and they're back to square one. Is there any recourse? Is there anything that they can do?
I think going forward, Nale, and it's a time for a civil society to build stronger ties with community members within Coligny. And again, institutions that have it at its objectives, or rather have it as their aim to work on issues of social justice, to stand up and sort of and engage and intervene within that community, because there's still quite a lot of trauma and still quite a lot of unpacking that still needs to be done, and professionals need to enter that space, similarly to engaging with the family, because in as much as they might be feeling that justice hasn't been served on their end, but also there's a lot that needs to happen going forward, and also similarly to launching an anti-violence and other campaigns within the community. So it's going to take quite a lot of civil society work and quite a lot of strong will from NGOs to go and intervene within that Coligny community.
Yeah, we'll have to leave it there, and we thank you so much for giving us your input into this particular case. And it's a very devastating case. We know how emotions ran high, but the circumstances around it have just been devastating, and they continue to be so when you look at exactly what unfolded and what is in these court papers.